Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Beginnings of the National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education podcast series. During this series, we will focus on the history of the center, as well as some stories from the beginning stages of the center's formation. We will be interviewing folks who have been involved with the center from the early beginnings and who have impacted the center in a productive way. In this episode, we get to hear from Rabbi Sara Perman, Rabbi Emerita of Congregation Emanu-El Israel in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. She has been involved with the center for many years as both an advisory board member as well as a steering committee leader and member. Rabbi Perman has certainly been a consistent supporter of the center and offers her experience and input at the most necessary times. Rabbi Perman has and will continue to be a part of the center's engagement and history. Keep listening to hear some of the great insights and stories that Rabbi Perman has to share.
Please describe your first memories of hearing about the establishment of the center.
Okay, so it wasn't so much the establishment of the center, but I think it's in part led to it, or was preceding the creation of the center. I was invited to attend a Kristallnacht observance at Seton Hill, the first fall that I came to Seton Hill, and I believe it would have been 1987. And it wasn't even held, it was held in one of that little section that's off of the, it's like a little prayer area that's on, I think, the 3rd floor or the 4th floor. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, why is a Catholic institution doing Kristallnacht when this is something the Jews should be observing? And that's certainly what got me involved, I would say, in part with the center and aware of the center.
What was your role in helping to found the center?
I don't think I had a role in helping to found the center. I know that early on I was asked to serve on the board of the steering committee. And I accepted because I felt it was important to be part of the center as the rabbi serving the congregation here in Greensburg, and also because there were Jewish members who I know were on the advisory board, specifically a member of my congregation at the time, that was Bob Davis, who had a close relationship with Sister Gemma Del Duca.
Thank you. Who were the most important people you worked with during the early stages of the center's creation?
Well, the first person I remember that was, I believe she was the director of this, maybe she wasn't the director, but she certainly headed the steering committee. That was Edie Neve, who at the time I believe was also the director of the Holocaust Center in Pittsburgh. I remember going to meetings that she was running. It was my first meeting with her, actually, or a first time getting to know her. I was impressed with her and her involvement with the Holocaust centers because of both Pittsburgh and here in Greensburg at Seton Hill. And the other people definitely that I was very involved with were Sister Gemma Del Duca and Sister Lois Skolko. These are the faces, the people that I remember in terms of talking about what kinds of programs were taking place, learning about the fact that the center was sending educators to study at Yad Vashem. The programs, obviously Kristallnacht, that was continued to be observed no longer in the little room, but actually in St. Joseph's, and then discussing the possibility of having a community-wide Yom HaShoah observance that involved not only Seton Hill, but also the Greensburg Ministerium, which sadly no longer exists. that I'm aware of. The Latrobe Ministerium, and we included other partners, B'nai B'rith, which also sadly is no longer around as an organization, at least in our community, the YWCA, early on, the Westmoreland Museum of American Art, I believe, no, I'm sorry, they were not involved. But the YWCA was, the NAACP. These were the organizations that ended up co-sponsoring the Yom HaShoah service. And then there was a decision to rotate it around the various communities between Greensburg and Latrobe primarily. I'm not sure if we had an early service up at St. Joseph's for Yom HaShoah. I know there's discussion about having it this year because of the anniversary of the center and because it is Greensburg's turn to sponsor it as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I have to add Wilda Kaler because she was, I would say, sort of the go-between for everybody in the center. And of course, as Hannah's learning, did a lot of the scuttle work, I guess you would call it, and keeping us on our toes and keeping us informed. She was the one who always was sending out minutes and the agenda and organizing the meetings and taking care of all the little nitty-gritty things that needed to be taken care of. So definitely have to say Wilda was one of the people I got to know early on.
And could you describe Sister Lois's role briefly, please?
I know she was involved with helping with leading the meetings as well, although Edie, initially it was really Edie, but Sister Lois certainly was there. There was another sister, I want to think it's Sister Vivian, but I'm not 100% sure, but you guys can go back and check who was on the committee. And I'll add some other people too in a few moments. But to answer your question about Sister Lois, I also knew that she was involved, and this impressed me, that in terms of teaching her students about the Holocaust, especially about the women, the experience of women in the Holocaust. And so I came to know that it wasn't just about sending educators to Yad Vashem, but it was also about instructing the students at Seton Hill about the Holocaust and the effects. And so it was really creating a new generation, and that's certainly what the educators were supposed to do too, but it was almost like leading by example that, you know, this is how you do this, okay? Of course, I remember Mike Sands, as we say in Judaism, Alav HaShalom, as being an early member of the center, having a lot to say. I remember meetings with John Polakowski, and I was impressed with the people who came to the center, not so much to our steering committee meetings, but definitely to the advisory board, realizing that these were some of the top scholars of Holocaust education in the country. Just, yeah, wow. I kept saying to myself and pinching myself. And of course, the more I was involved with the center, the more I tried to spread the word to my colleagues that, you know, this was a program that needed to be considered for their communities in terms of sending educators to either our conferences or to Yad Vashem, and to just make them aware that this was happening.
What other important things do you want to tell me about the early days of the center? So
one of my earliest memories was attending not so much I certainly attended the conferences that were held too, but one of the first conferences, it wasn't the first one, but it was one that the Nostra Aetate Award was given to Jan Karski, and hearing him speak and realizing what an amazing, courageous man he was, and how much he had tried to make known what was happening during the Holocaust, and that he was here in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, of all places, and that, we had the opportunity to hear his story, to meet him, and that he was being honored in such a way. It just was like mind-blowing to me. And over the years, I've come to realize as well that the people who are honored by Seton Hill, by the Nostra Aetate Award, the scholarship that has taken place, it's just, like I said, and we're this little Catholic university, and I joke that I'm the rabbi of Seton Hill. So I say of this, we, the community, okay, not just the Jewish community, but Seton Hill has this amazing group of people who have walked through the doors, who have spoken to us, who have tried to teach us. It just is mind-boggling. I had mentioned that there was, when we were talking before the podcast began, of hearing somebody from, I believe it was Bishop Worrell's office, the time he was Bishop Worrell in Pittsburgh, do a session. And again, thinking, wow, the scholarship that takes place. I know also I have a colleague, Jim Rudin, who's on our advisory board, and knowing, again, the scholarship that he's produced. More recently, obviously I'd heard of Eva Fleischner over the years, but I was not aware until really Carol's book came out past year, of the kind of scholarship that Eva Fleischner did on Holocaust stuff. And so realizing that the level of education and scholarship that has come out of Seton Hill has been mind-boggling, and I think needs to be broadcast more widely to the world. So whether it's through this podcast, or we've suggested other things over the years of attending Catholic educators conferences and having people who've participated in the Yad Vashem program to speak or to go and inform others of what's happening, I think that becomes very important. Something flittered through my mind for a second there, and it has escaped me. Maybe I'll come back to it at the very end, in terms of the center. But anyhow, those are some of my early memories. And also the fact that we were sending educators to Yad Vashem, having gone to a program at Yad Vashem myself that was organized out of Pittsburgh, just a few days, and realizing and getting to meet some of the students who had gone through Seton Hill to Yad Vashem. Again, just amazing, and knowing that being in Israel and having that experience of learning at Yad Vashem, and also seeing Israel, because Gemma made sure that people would see Israel and make connections, I think was extremely important. I also have to say kudos to the center over the years of having Holocaust survivors come and speak, specifically for Kristallnacht. I think that has had an important effect on the students, especially when after Kristallnacht's observance, there was the opportunity to sit and talk in the parlors with the survivors, so that they had more of that one-on-one experience.
Yes, I certainly agree with everything you said. In your opinion, what was the founding vision of the center?
Well, I saw it originally on two levels. One was obviously to teach the Holocaust. Like I said, it has blown me away to look back over the 35 years and realize that, whether it's been Sister Lois, whether it's been through the educators who've gone to Israel, whether it's been through the conferences we've had, the Lefrak conferences we've had, whether it's been just having a Kristallnacht service and watching all these students, especially the basketball team, walk in. You could really see those guys. but it was important to their coach. And that says something as well. So certainly it was about teaching the Holocaust. The other founding vision that I came to recognize and deeply appreciate was the concern to do interfaith work and to reach out to the Jewish community on so many different levels. And it wasn't just the Jewish community, because I remember when the Dalai Lama came to Seton Hill, and the fact that there have been Muslim educators who have been part of the conferences over the years. It just, like I said, it's the interfaith work that I think has been certainly promoted by the center. I won't say it's, just Seton Hill, but where I've seen it is through the work of the center.
In your opinion, has the work and the mission of the center changed over the years?
Yes, I would say it has, definitely, in a good way. And that's the great thing about the center, is that there's been this desire to broaden its vision, I would say. First of all, that it's no longer just about teaching about the Holocaust, but it's Holocaust and genocide. And I think that's a very important message, because one of the things that the Jewish community has stated over and over again, and I'm using the broader Jewish community worldwide, is the concept of never again. Well, sadly, we've seen it has been again and again and again. And so the idea of having speakers who have addressed genocide that's taken place in Syria, or genocide that's taken place in Africa, or a genocide that seems to be taking place in China, I think is extremely important. And that while the Holocaust, without question, was unique in our history in terms of a really industrialized genocide, that the fact that there is the killing still of a group of people who think differently, and that it continues to sadly and tragically be seen throughout the world. I think there's an important message there. And so it has been part of the center's growth to, or increasing their vision to recognize this and to get across that message, but using the Holocaust sort of as the grounding basis for getting across this message. So that's definitely one of the areas where I've seen some change. I also see it in terms of, I think initially, I know there were Jews who were not necessarily educators who went to Yad Vashem in the early years to study, which I think was important, extremely important, because I have a sense that while we sadly also have tended to put an emphasis on the Holocaust, and this is an argument within the general Jewish community, that there's more to Judaism than the Holocaust, and that we need to emphasize more of the positive aspects of Jewish life. We still cannot forget, and we need to have Jews who are educated about the Holocaust, so that, again, we can serve as ambassadors and who can go out and teach not just other Jews, but also in conversation with our Christian and non-Christian neighbors and friends, and possibly even relatives as it goes. So that's, the fact, though, that it has been sort of more focused on educating educators, I think has been one of the ways that the center has changed. I was involved in recreating the mission statement and all those meetings. I spent a lot of time on the Hill. But it was the process, to me, was an education as well as to how you go about creating a mission and a vision for an organization, and trying to see beyond. I believe we did it around the 25th year, but it still was. I mean, I've lost sense of time, but it was quite an education. So that's one of the ways I've seen some changes in the center, and of course having to adjust to the COVID and the new technology of being able to be with each other through Zoom, or whether it was conferences by Zoom or whatever, just a very different way of handling things. Although I miss, the in-person chance to, especially like at the luncheons, to sit and talk with some of the educators during the conferences.
Mm-hmm. Any other information you want to add?
Little ones. I had this image for years of these children like tugging at my skirt, saying almost like, remember me, or, just weeping. And one of the most powerful, like I said, one of the most powerful experiences. And you asked me if I had any other memories, and I had shared one with you guys before the podcast began, and I have to share it. It was one of the early experiences I had with Gemma. It was really before she was known in the community, or certainly the Jewish community, and her work with the Holocaust Center. And it might have been that first year that the center was founded, or it might have been the second year, but it was early on in my career. It was Yom Kippur, and Gemma, I joke that she's the most Jewish nun I know, or sister that I know. She was at Yom Kippur services here in Greensburg. And we have a break in the afternoon because it's a whole day service. And during that break, I usually teach, but there's like a half an hour where I can get myself together and go into the room that I teach in. And a former president of the congregation comes storming in saying, "Do you know there's a nun sitting in the sanctuary?" And I'm like, "Yes, yeah, so what?" Do you know she's praying in Hebrew? And I'm like, "So what?" And this certainly, obviously Gemma, her reputation, her appearance at synagogue, because she comes almost every Friday night, whether it was in person before COVID, whether it was online since COVID, whether it's back in person, she is a known individual without question. And I am truly grateful to her. And I have to say, I forgot about Sister Noel, and I'm sorry that I forgot about mentioning Sister Noel, because I came to know her too. So sweet, so kind. Not that Gemma isn't. I just have had a more personal relationship with Gemma, who I consider to be like a sister, like an older sister to me, giving me advice on lots of issues. But Noel and Gemma, the two of them, I am so grateful to them for founding the center, for creating it, and for those who continue to support it and want to take it forward into the future. And so I'm hoping that this anniversary that we're celebrating for a whole year, because 36 is double chai, double life in Judaism. That it will continue to exist, to grow, to teach, and to expand its mission to educators and to students as well.